Hi there, my name's Jake Seibel. I'm going to be your local historian taking you through what this place would have looked like in 1952. This place behind me that you're seeing is known as Mendota Village. At least this is how it used to look before the 1952 flood of the Minnesota River. I will take you through all of these houses, some of which have been washed away or destroyed by the flood. Now, those Native Americans have relocated, but a lot of these homes were home to Native peoples who coincided and lived with the French, British, and other European colonizers or settlers or traders, however you want to call them, in this village. Off in this direction, if I were to build it, you would be able to see St. Paul. This is current day St. Paul, right in this area. This would be the Mississippi River, and this would be the Minnesota River. You can see that this is an island here. This is called Pike Island. This is still an island today and can be seen on many hiking trails on the island. This bridge that I'm standing on was a railway system that connected Mendota Village over to St. Paul. As we walk across the village, you'll be able to see multiple different styles and types of Native American homes, as well as European style homes, which were built by Henry Sibley and other families that lived in this area. I'd like to now take this path, which is still here and today in Mendota, and I'll include a photo of this village right now. As you can see, these buildings are still very much alive and well in our Minnesota State Historical Society protected areas. This path connects all the way up to Highway 13. This was built, and while it did destroy some historical landmarks, uh, it still provided a good transportation system for these Native American tribes, tribal people, and their fellow neighbors who they coincided and lived with. So, I'm getting all of this information from a map drawn by Don Newcomb that's titled the 1891 to 1952 Squatter Map. It is a map that showcases not only the old uh, riverway of the Minnesota River, but also all of these old houses that would have been there at the time of 1952 before the destruction by the floods, and also building of new highway systems which destroyed some of these buildings. So to begin, as we take this drive down Highway 13, which you could do today, and you would see some of these buildings in similar states but with different purposes now. I urge you to go and take a look at those buildings and refer back to this video once you have an understanding for what they're used for now. I will introduce what they were used for back then. So this is the Drew family house. One of the first village places that you would see coming into Mendota Village would be this Drew family house. As you can see, very useful for housing and very localized, centralized location next to a grocery store that was owned by C.T. Newhouse. We won't go in there. We don't want to disrupt business too much. This was a Gaultier family duplex. As you can see, quite a large building, especially for the time. Would have been prominent and housed a lot of people. You can take a peek inside there. I don't want to intrude too much on their business, but this here was the bar owner's house. The bar that this is referring to is the bar Bow and Arrow, which was a very popular gathering site for not only Native Americans but also European traders. As you can see, they kind of are like, "What the heck am I doing?" Anyways, this is the old post office. Nowadays, this post office has moved down the highway a little bit, down that way about a quarter of a mile. But as you can see, Nice little post office area that was very central to the location of the village. This here is the Gay Paris Bar. Take a peek inside of there, you can see a lot of people have gathered, and this would have been very typical for your day in as Native Americans that have written accounts of this bar and of this village are constantly reminding their history of how many people would be able to gather in this bar, how many family gatherings were happening, and just how much fun they had. Not just drink, obviously not just drinking, but just their kids would come in as well and just have quality family time. If I go down this way, there's no houses built because today you wouldn't be able to see any of these houses. As you can see on the sign, this is a strip of land on the official that was officially titled on documents as H. Sibley's Indian Houses. So as you can imagine, there would be houses lined up this way, going all the way back to that lake back there. Now this plot is home to Highway 55. So they were all displaced, obviously, and there is now a highway system that runs through this area, which you could take today. But used to be a lot of Indian homes before that reroute. Now as we come back this way, remember the bar, bow and arrow is there. Now you can see this house today. This is the Hippolyte Dupuis house. Now on Google Maps it might be referred to as the Sibley Tea House, but this was home to Hippolyte Dupuis. As you can see, a couple of family members, and this house is generally how the house looks today. It's a little bit more of a sandstone type look. It was repurposed, so now there's a extension to the back of the house, but I believe this is what the house would have looked like in the early 1900s. Before I forget, let's go visit the church, which still stands today as the oldest church in the history of Minnesota. I'll take a minute to showcase the church on Google Maps. As you can see, you can look at any pictures. This is a very beautiful church. You can see the very tall tower there. This is St. Peter's Catholic Church. It is the oldest church in Minnesota. It has long served members of the Mendota, Mendwacaton, Dakota tribal community. They hold their annual Wikipi, sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, but it's basically how they described it as their powwow on the church grounds. This is a very beautiful church today. Today, you would see a large church right in this area here that kind of took over and was able to keep this church as kind of a historical site to keep it from being damaged any further. But very beautiful church and has been around for centuries, as is the oldest church in the state of Minnesota. As we go back down Highway 13 here, we can take this path, which is still here today. Today, you would see a parking lot right in this area where you can park your car, or you could drive your car down this path, which is down a hill. And what's just really cool about seeing this area today is you'll still be able to see this hill, which just seems like a hill at first, but if you climb up it, if I climb this hill here, as you would in real life, which is a little bit more difficult than in Minecraft, but there is still a railway system there. Nowadays, if I did this, the hill looks more like this height, because what they did once they stopped using this railroad and they moved the railroad down to this area, and it runs this way, down like this, they built, just covered this railroad up top with grass and made it a part of the natural landscape. I haven't tried this because I'm not sure, it might be illegal, but I'm pretty sure if you dug down far enough, you'd be able to see the old railroad for the Minnesota railroad system. Nowadays, the railroad is down here. Anyways, as you go down this way, you can see this is the servant's house. The servant, actually, no, sorry. Let me re-look at my map here. This was Steve Cobbler's house. Right next to Henry Sibley's. Henry Sibley's is this grand, giant kind of, if I go in here, you'll be able to see just a lot of, it's a grand house, and you can go in there today. You can book a tour on the Henry Sibley site, and it's a grand house. It was the original, the place where they dreamt of the Minnesota Territory. So you can see it's very large, has this outside balcony with some stairs going down. And now this garden is still here today, and the servant's house in the back of this courtyard is still there today as well. You can see it's a little bit smaller. It's the servant's house, so it's going to be mostly used for servants of Henry Sibley. Now next door, or if you would say next door to Henry Sibley's house, is the Fairbolt house. This is also still here today. I'm not sure if they let you go in and tour the house, but from the outside, this is pretty much exactly what it looks like today. Um, I've just done a reimagining of what the inside would look like, possibly. Obviously, the Fairbolt family would have lived here, very prominent in Minnesota history. And then down this way, you can see that there's the stone arches, which is very not popular, but very historically important for this Minnesota Railroad, as there was an arch built here and then an arch built further down in that direction, which was very beautiful to look at and significant in the history of Minnesota. So in real life, you could take this road down and you would see this depot here. Now there's a lot more trees nowadays, and it looks a little bit overgrown, but you can imagine from the map that there would be the map lists this as a, excuse me, a factory, sorry, a warehouse, and then back here is a house and a factory, which you can imagine was used for probably lumbering, quite possibly making of boats. This is probably the house of the owner of the factory and the warehouse. But yeah, this today you could still see there's a lot of trees covering what's back here, and it says private property, so I didn't want to go back there. I didn't want to intrude on people's privacy. So, but yeah, you can still see this warehouse here today, and it's pretty cool to think about how it was on this 1950s map, and probably earlier. Obviously, this map is from 1891 to 1952, so it's very possible that this was here in the 1800s. As you can see, now our path kind of takes us underneath these stone arches, which you could still see today. Very beautiful arches. Maybe I'll include a picture in the arches as well. So as you come through, you can see that there's a lot of family houses down in this way, and then there's a whole village over that way too. So first, let's take you over to the right. You can take this path, as I said, in real life. You could take this path and go over to where these houses would have been before the flood took them out, and just imagine what it would have been like there. So first is the Labatt's residence. Now, would be a residence of 8. Census records show that there was a family of 8 living here, including a 68-year-old grandma. So it really speaks to the historical influence that Native Americans had with their family. It wasn't just a nuclear family model with a mom and dad and a couple of kids. It was very cooperative, with grandparents living together and everyone kind of following in the same path, living in the same house, being a community together within the same house rather than maybe cities away like a nuclear family would have. Further down this direction, you have the Newcomb's residence. Now, Newcomb was a very prominent name in the Mendota Mendwakatan Nation. You can see their house here. This actually is the last name of the elder that drew this map for me, that I'm taking all this information from, and who provided me with the information to make this video. So shout out to Don Newcomb and his help with being able to enable me to make this map for you guys. Now this is the Felix residence, later on the Robinettes. This is a very prominent name that you see in census records for this area, for the Mendota village. They were a last name that was combined with French and Native American. A lot of mixed heritage there, which is they're very proud of. So this was the Felix family home, and then it became the Robinette family home. The surnames Felix and Robinette hold strong connections to the community. There is another Felix house located down down to the left, which we'll see later in the squatters section of the map. Carl Robinette was one of the Robinettes that lived in this house, and was there all the way up through 1950s until that flood took out these places. So here's the Robinette and the Felix residence. That would have been very prominent, very large families that lived here. Now, if we take this path back this way, sorry, before I go that way, I want to point out that if you go to the site today, the Mendota Village site today, and you walk along the riverbanks of the Minnesota River, you'll see what looks, you won't be able to see a path like this, but you'll be able to imagine it. There's a little, probably where people put rivers today, or sorry, boats in the river today. But there, you can see that it's been there for quite some time. It's very worn, and you can see that there's a path-like structure and a hill that leads up, not just a hill, but almost like a ramp that would have led up into this Henry Sibley trading site, and that would have been really important for the trading of the time. Now come this way down the path. I'll go a little bit faster. This would have been the Olson residence, as you could see, imagined as a teepee. I tried to make a teepee as best as I could with the square functions of Minecraft. There's not really triangles or sticks that you could stick out the top, but this Olson residence was home right next to the railroads. You can see that the Minnesota government probably wasn't too concerned with their the noise complaints that coming from the Native American tribes, but you can imagine that it was probably quite noisy living there with the train going right over your head. Now as you come down this way past the Minnesota Railroad Bridge that connected Mendota to St. Paul over there, you can come over to this, which is the Christopherson's house. So Christopherson, this is a very small house on the map, but still important to note. And then next door to this Christopherson house was noted on the map as a boat storage facility. What's also important to note is the ferry crossings, the Henry Sibley ferry crossing would have, or might have, used this location to store some of their ferries. As you can see, I have some boats in here. I tried to build this to look like a canoe, but a ferry that would have enabled you to travel by boat over this large body of water to St. Paul or to Fort Snelling, which would have been over in that direction as well. It remained in operation for 90 years. Many ancestors of the Mendota, Mendwakatan, Dakota tribal community used the ferry to access Minneapolis and St. Paul, and some of those community members also worked as ferry operators. So you can imagine they probably had a dock that came out here, and then they were able to store boats in this facility here, Mendota Boat Storage. As we come back to the main road here, you can see this first house as the Al Fournier residence. Now, this Al Fournier residence would have been one of the first homes that you would see after coming off of the boat landing. And next door is the Floyd Perron house. The surname Perron, or Perron, if you're French, holds strong connection to the Mendota, Mendwakatan, Dakota tribal community. You can see a beautiful house here. And then next door, it would be the Lorena Weaver's house. Lorena Weaver is believed to be the owner of this house. It was difficult to discern from the text of Don Newcomb's squatter's map, but we believe that through population records, we were able to determine that this would be Lorena Weaver's house. It's also unclear if she had any surviving children, but from the population census and just the scribes on the map, we were able to determine that this was probably the Lorena Weaver's house. Now, this next house would be Bill Pelagie's. Pelagie is also a very popular surname in the Mendota, Mendwakatan village. It is believed that there is quite a large family here, large presence. So this is where they would have lived before the floods of 1950s. This next house here, Sophia Felix, kind of more of the same. Just so you could see a large village type community down in this region. This Newcomb family house, if you remember the name Newcomb from those houses over on that shoreline, as I said, a very large family, would have needed to house a lot of children, as it was a large family that spread throughout the village. Over here is the Spencer residence. Now, obviously, it is unclear what any of these residences have looked like, but my interpretation is that they very well could have been planning for the floods that could happen, being this close in proximity to the river. So I know that some Native American tribes were building houses like this in order to combat flooding up on stilts, and then kind of with the deer hide or bear hide that they could cover over the walls. So my interpretation of more of a traditional near floodwaters house that the Spencer residence could have looked like. Again, this is the Minnesota River. On the map, you can see how I have here. It kind of looks like a 90-degree bend and then a 90-degree bend that way that connects with the Mississippi. But in real life, what you would see is that this section, if you can follow my crosshair in the middle of the screen, this section would be cut like this, and it's more of a 45-degree angle rather than a 90. So what happened is the river was actually altered. In the 1970s, the course of the Minnesota River at Mendota was altered. The channel seen on the current-day map was created to straighten the river's east end. An altered watercourse was deemed necessary in the 1970s to improve the navigation and control of the floods that ravaged the squatters section of the map. So this section here that we just looked at. However, river dredging can have significant impacts on local communities. This can include changes to sediment transportation or agricultural runoff, a potential increase of pollutants entering waterways, and a degraded habitat for fish/aquatic life. This straightened section is not evident on Don Newcomb's hand-drawn squatters map, on which the digital version is based. So, as you can imagine, this river would have gone like this and become more of a 45-degree straight line. That's how it is today, and it's hard to see these houses on the map because they seem so far separated, but this is how close they would have been if there had not been a river that was put in between them, separating the community. This is how close it would have felt for them just to go, for all these families to just come up the road, visit with their friends. If they're coming to church on a Sunday, maybe they have a path. I actually know that there's a path in this area in real life. I've taken the path before that goes up towards the church. It kind of goes up the hill that was created and then comes down into this warehouse. Um, and then up into the church. So you can just imagine how close all of this was. That was the Mendota village. And all of these houses up here, all these buildings are very well could still be there. These houses are still there. You can see them today. But these houses, if you took this walk through the stone arches down into this village, all of these houses would be gone today because of the 1950s flood. All of the houses down there are gone today. Um, and what happened with these Native American people where they weren't allowed to get flood insurance through their insurance agencies because of where they lived, which is obviously a big problem because when these houses were destroyed, instead of building back on their community's historical, ancient, spiritually important lands, they were forced to move out, to move away, and some of them have come back. And as Don Newcomb did, and who provided me with this map again, thank you so much, Don Newcomb, for providing me with this map. But you can see that a lot of those legacies have been lost, and um, the history of these houses could have been forgotten about if not for Don Newcomb's squatter map. And this video is just trying to illuminate the houses and the tribal affiliations that used to live here, and some of which have come back and tried to make them important part of this area again. Today's Mendota, as I said, are just those red brick houses in the background, and a little bit of the historical side with Henry Sibley, focusing on the colonization and the settlement of fur traders. but they kind of fail to go into the Native American side of the history of these lands and just how important the connection of these rivers are, as you can see behind me, and the Pike Island, and just the serious connection to spirituality and history that the Native American tribe of the Mendota Mendwakatan village has in this area. So thank you for watching this video with me. Thank you for going on this tour with me. I hope this taught you a little bit, and I hope that you go on this section of land down here in the Mendota village, down just north of the Sibley house, and take a walk down in this area and just imagine what it would have been like to have all these houses here and all these tribes communicating and just living their life along the Minnesota River before it eventually destroyed their houses and they were forced to relocate because of insurance. So thank you again for watching my video. I appreciate it, and have a great day.